Right. So I'm a bit late to this news, and plenty of other people have already talked about it. It's about a week old now, but I wanted to weigh in on it and give my own opinions. So basically, MLS, which is Major League Soccer, the main league for football/soccer in the United States, it has been reported that they've been considering moving from a schedule that sees them play from March to November, from that to a schedule that instead plays from August to May, which would be more in line with a lot of the global footballing calendar, or at least the global footballing calendar in Europe, which might be where the MLS wants to be. I want to talk about this because I don't think that's a very good idea and ultimately would be harmful to the game rather than help it, even if it would be in line with European leagues. So MLS kind of is in a really unique position that I don't know if too many other leagues in the world are in. Maybe the A League in Australia could say it's in a similar position, but even then, MLS has a lot more attention outside of its own country than the A League gets. Because MLS is trying to grow a sport that is not the most popular in the US and is in fact competing with four other major sports for eyeballs and attention. But it is also playing the most popular sport in the world, not the most popular sport in its own country, but the most popular sport in the world. So it's in a really weird, unique place. And it kind of is walking the line between incorporating like their own unique American identity and culture into their league and their clubs, whereas at the same time trying to stay in line with FIFA and European sport and understanding of football. And you see that with the clubs where plenty of them are named FC and others SC. So you have football club and soccer club, and teams with both soccer club in their name and football club in their name in the same league competing against each other. And it's a really interesting, unique thing. But I think MLS has kind of tried to become bigger than it is sometimes. Like, I think they've not always appreciated the position that they're in. I think they have been smart at times with pragmatically understanding their position in the sporting landscape of the U.S. and not getting too big. It's not widely known, but it has been reported that in 2002, the league owners had a meeting to discuss whether it was even worth continuing with MLS or if they were going to have to fold. And they did just about manage to scrape by in the early 2000s, and now it is a much more thriving league. But with some aching pains along the way, they have at least gained a better understanding of where they are and not always tried to compete with other sports in the US, which is probably where the summer schedule has mainly come from, because it's hard to compete with leagues, like, especially American football, in the NFL and college football, both of which are massive sporting institutions in the U.S. And if you don't live in the U.S., you might not realize just how big of an entertainment behemoth American football is within American culture, because everyone watches American football, and the Super Bowl is a de facto national holiday, and no other sport comes close to it. Like, even basketball, baseball, and ice hockey, they have their own respective support. And basketball, especially, has been a sport that's been growing a lot in the US, but it still doesn't touch the television audience that the NFL is getting. And even college football has kind of had to bow down to the NFL in that respect, because their national championship game is played on a Monday. Usually, the way it works in the U.S. is college football is played on Saturday and the NFL on Sunday. But during the playoffs, the NFL decides to start playing games on Sunday, and so college football has to begrudgingly put their national championship game at a much worse time slot on Monday, just because they don't really have the ability to compete with the NFL. And college football is still miles ahead of MLS in audience numbers. Like, no one competes with the NFL. And if the MLS decided to adopt a schedule that went from August to May, they would be directly competing with the NFL for their entire season. And that wouldn't really go well for MLS, I don't think, because it's still, whilst growing and doing very well to get a lot of new fans into the game, it's not going to touch the NFL. it doesn't even touch college football or the NBA right now. So competing with the NFL really wouldn't be a smart decision. Also, because some teams play in stadiums with NFL teams. So the Seattle Sounders, I'm trying to think, Charlotte does it, a few other teams play in NFL stadiums, and that's not as big of a deal when you're playing through the summer when the NFL isn't playing. But when the NFL starts up in August, all of a sudden you get some more schedule clashes. And between an NFL game and MLS team, especially when you're playing in an NFL team stadium, almost always the NFL team is going to get precedent over scheduling. And so if two teams are scheduled to play on the same day for soccer and American football, the American football team is going to be the one who gets to play. And on top of just not being a good look for the league, that's also really harmful for ticket prices, or like tickets getting fans into the stadium if their fixtures could be subject to change based on if an NFL team is playing. That's not going to be a problem for every team, and actually the majority of teams don't play in NFL stadiums, but there's still enough who do that could be an issue for the MLS, and I think that would, like, it's just not a good idea to compete with the NFL. You're not going to attract more casual viewers if they're deciding between the NFL and soccer, which is still the fifth most popular sport in the country. So that's one reason why it really just wouldn't work to compete with the NFL. But also, going from August to May would put you in competition with the Premier League. And having grown up in the US, I live in the UK now, but having grown up in the US, of the people I do know who watched soccer/football in the U.S. When I talk about the U.S., I might say soccer a bit more just because it works better with the U.S. Um, in those circumstances, a lot of the people I know from the U.S. who do care about football/soccer care about the Premier League more than MLS. And so not only would MLS be competing with the NFL, they would be competing with the Premier League. And the Premier League has probably the best all-around quality of any league in the world. You know, there might be better teams than English ones in Spain or Germany or whatever, but I think from top to bottom, the Premier League is the highest quality league in the world. And MLS is better than it's given credit for, I think, but it's nowhere near the Premier League. And when given the choice between watching the highest quality league in the world and MLS, which isn't awful, but definitely is not at the level of the Premier League, I feel like most people would choose to watch the Premier League over MLS. And so once again, playing in the summer just makes more sense. And they do get some fans coming in because they don't have any other football/soccer to watch. And so they choose to watch MLS because it actually is going on. And they might even pick up a few fans that way that they wouldn't playing from August to May. So you have competition with other sports, uh, particularly the NFL, but also Premier League. But then the other really big thing is weather. And in the South, because the U.S. is a massive country, there would be areas where you could play a winter schedule and it wouldn't be a massive deal and might even be a relief. Like from like Texas to Florida, those places would probably quite like to have a winter schedule where they could play games in January when it's not quite so intense, the heat. But for teams in the Midwest and Northeast, the winters are basically unplayable. And the way the U.S. sports schedule works in general, the American football is a bit strange. It kind of toes the line, but it starts in August, ends by January usually. And so they kind of get done by December for the regular season. The playoffs go through January, so not too many teams are playing in the cold. And then the NHL and NBA, ice hockey and basketball will play from about October to June. And so they play through the winter. And then MLB plays about the same time MLS, around like March to October. And so there's a reason that it's basketball and ice hockey who play through the winter when only really the NFL does it in the playoffs, and MLB and MLS currently don't try it because uh, it's really cold in the Midwest and Northeast. I remember a while ago the U.S. played Honduras in a World Cup qualifier in Minnesota in February, and that went terribly. Like, it was super controversial because it was super cold, virtually unplayable, and I'm pretty sure Honduras had to sub out their goalkeeper at halftime because he was showing symptoms of hypothermia. Like, it's not a smart idea to play this every single week. And so a lot of the teams in the North and Midwest, again, it wouldn't be an issue for the South, but for a lot of the teams in the league, it would be a massive issue when the winter time is virtually unplayable for an outdoor sport. And the MLS isn't actually unique in the world of football for this. Most of the Scandinavian leagues also play through the summer for the same exact reason, because it's too cold and too harsh of weather conditions to play through the winter. And so I believe like Sweden, Norway, Denmark might do winter, but Sweden and Norway, I think for sure, they don't play through the winter, and so they're off from the rest of the European schedule. But it makes more sense for them to play through the summer because the winter time temperatures just aren't good for an outdoor sport. And so if MLS decides to go to a winter schedule, they are opening up a lot of potential health concerns for their fans and players. And also, on the topic of fans, the fans are much more likely to come into a game in the summer than in the winter. And there will be those who would prefer to watch a game in, negative 10 degrees instead of uh, like 25 Celsius. But that's not the majority of fans. Most of them would rather be at a game in the summer than the winter. And the few snow games that have happened in the MLS in the beginning and end of the season, when winter is either just beginning or just about to end, those ones tend to be quite poorly attended because the average fan doesn't want to go watch their team in subpolar temperatures. And so all around, you're alienating fans, exposing your players to health risks. And I think Pulisic also, with World Cup qualifiers, he had to go undergo medical tests because he played a qualifier for the World Cup in the winter in the US and then went to play in the Club World Cup in Saudi Arabia. And just those temperature extremes weren't healthy for a person to go through in such quick succession. So exposing players to health risks, alienating potential fans, and also competing with a much bigger sports league in the country. And for all of these reasons, it doesn't make sense for MLS to switch to a August to May schedule, even if that would put them up with the rest of at least most European leagues. It doesn't work in the US, and I'm kind of surprised they're entertaining this. And I hope that those in charge of MLS clubs and the league as a whole are smart enough to realize that moving their schedule into the winter would be a poor idea for soccer in the US.